Okay, well, thank you very much, everyone, for this invitation. It's a pleasure to be here with you. So, I'm speaking from Caracas. I am in the southwest part of Caracas, about 5 kilometers from where the attack took place on January 3rd. And so, since this conversation begins with the context of the Monroe Doctrine, I want to first say just a few things about that idea, that concept, and where we're at today with this. First, the Monroe Doctrine is basically a speech given during the administration of President James Monroe, 1823, where basically the United States shows this imperialist attitude towards the region of the American continent, the rest of the American continent, and lays out how it intends to be the sole superpower, at least, throughout this continent. And in a way, was aimed not really at defending. Some people interpreted it at the time as a defense of the South American liberation and independence struggles, and some trying to prevent Europeans from trying to reconquer the lands. But history has shown, and if you looked a little deeper into what the U.S. founding fathers and their thought was, history showed that eventually what this really meant was the United States trying to exert complete domination of the region, turn it into its sphere of influence, so to speak, because it saw it as an extension of its own territory. Now, this is not something that just happened in 1823, or that was as a result of the independence movements or the possibility of Europe gaining further inroads into the continent. It is actually something that comes from the very foundations of U.S. Of the society of the country of the U.S. And I say this because I'm going to quote a letter written by Thomas Jefferson, one of the founding fathers of the United States, in 1786, well before the 1823 proclamation of the Monroe Doctrine, and where he is asked, this is a response to a question when he's asked, why doesn't the United States support the independence movements in South America? And his reply is this: our confederacy must be viewed as the nest from which all America, North and South, is to be peopled. We should take care to not think it for the interest of that great continent to press too soon on the Spaniards. Those countries cannot be in better hands. My fear is that they're too feeble, the Spanish, to hold them till our populations can be sufficiently advanced to gain it from them piece by piece. So you see, from the onset of the way that the U.S. Government and the U.S. society imagined the rest of the American continent, was an extension of their own project. Eventually, they thought it was a matter of time to get enough strength so that they could incorporate those territories. It's always been an expansionist view, while that comes in complete contraposition with the Bolivarian idea. Simón Bolívar being the liberator and being attributed the ideas of South American independence. But of course, it's not just Bolívar. I mean, there's other thinkers that come before him, Miranda and others, that sort of had this other view of what the population of this continent should be. And in that other view, it was really a project of emancipation, of liberation and emancipation, and building republics that would do away with monarchy, that would sort of craft a new type of society. In a sense, when you look at the real policies that were proposed by Bolivar during his constitutional projects, you could find even elements of a pre-socialist type of thought. And a lot of this he got, of course, from the Haitian Revolution that happened in 1804. That was really the moment where the South American independence movement turned from a movement that was really just replacing the crown to a movement that had a social project, beginning with the emancipation of enslaved people. It was the abolition of slavery that really made the transformation of the South American liberation movement, because behind it there was this idea that you had to build a new society, that even the social distinctions of race in the way that they were created by the empire, they needed to be abolished as well. People needed to mix. There's a quote by Bolivar said, "In our blood has been pure. We need to mix it." So you see a stark contrast between what the United States sees as the future of the region as to what the independence movements see as the future of the region. Of course, as soon as the U.S. starts expanding and growing, the part of its intervention in the South is to divide even more and more the possibilities of a united South America or Latin America. You see the creating tensions between countries, divisions. For example, the Republic of Colombia, as founded by Bolivar, was what today would be Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, and Panama. So you see the intent of breaking up that unity, because, of course, to dominate, you need to split, divide, of course, and then be able to gain some of the resources. Now, I don't want to go into the whole, a whole history of the Monroe Doctrine, because there's a lot of important moments, and Venezuela has been a protagonist of almost all the major instances in which the Monroe Doctrine has been invoked. It was invoked in 1902 when Venezuela was blockaded by European powers, and they tried to they were trying to collect a debt, which wasn't really a debt that was honest or legal. It was a debt that occurred as a result of the wars of independence and other civil wars. But in any case, that was the first major blockade that Venezuela suffered. It was also invoked by the United States when they got into the territorial dispute between the British Empire and Venezuela on the border region of where the Essequibo River lies, which is still a territorial controversy between Venezuela and now the Cooperative Republic of Guyana. And now, of course, as time goes by and as each American president, draws up a new corollary, a new addition to the Monroe Doctrine, now we're suffering of the so-called Trump corollary. It's something that is invoked in the new national security strategy of the United States, and which basically says that, or means that the United States will have a right or will intervene. They don't have the right, but they will intervene in Latin America if they see that their interests and their resources, and what they believe is their resources, are going to be used or maybe secured by other powers, by foreign powers. And this is what basically has given, or what Trump has used to sort of justify, at the end of the day, the intervention in Venezuela during the past few weeks, but precisely on January 3rd. I'll say one more thing about the Monroe Doctrine, though, and the process of this has been a process of 200 years, where the United States has seen, again, because of its political culture, because of the concept of manifest destiny, white man burden, all these theories that sort of justified U.S. interventionism and sort of justified the U.S. as being some sort of superior a type of civilization that should exert dominance over the rest of the continent. Well, with this justification, we have seen all types of attempts at colonization, recolonization, and violence in the past 200 years. We're talking about everything from occupying territories like they have done with Puerto Rico, how they occupied Nicaragua. There was a point in time in history when they there was a U.S. president or a U.S. person who was nominally the president of Nicaragua as they took over the country with a bunch of mercenaries and were able to seize the government. They took at other points in time they have taken the customs of countries like the Dominican Republic. They managed the oil in Mexico at some point in time. They managed the mines in Peru, Bolivia, Chile at some point in time. They managed the meat production in Argentina at some point in time. They managed finances of Brazil at some point in time. So this is part of the constant intervention without, and that's not mentioning, the other more obvious and direct intervention on political cases where the United States has promoted coup d'états, has promoted uprisings against governments that were nationalists or that were somewhere in the spectrum more to the left of what the United States wanted to be. And we have seen, we can list, we can make a forever long list of how many of these governments have been attacked. There's a famous, of course, 1954 coup against Jacobo Arbenz in Guatemala, but also against Chedi Jagan, which nobody speaks that much about, in Guyana around the same time. Of course, Allende in 73, and we can go on and talk about many more. What I do want to say, though, is that perhaps after the Vietnam War and after sometime around the Vietnam War, because of media, television, because you were now getting to see images, and the United States, the public opinion in the United States was able to see what the U.S. Army was doing in other places around the world. It started becoming ever more difficult for these direct interventions by the U.S. So they started to have to include other types of intervention. That's why the coup in Chile is not only a military coup that is supported by the CIA, but there's also a campaign of financial asphyxiation against Chile, against the Chilean economy. It's a famous phrase, and make the economy scream. But then, that has been developing even more. I mean, then we have, of course, the blockade against Cuba that we have seen for, so many decades now. And when we come to the current, the current period, the 21st century, we see that the Monroe Doctrine expressed in much more ways than just the violent or the conventional type of attacks or of intervention. You see ways that perhaps are not so obvious. The media, of course, imposing a media narrative by mainstream media, using that or promoting that fake news, just a cognitive war in essence through social media is, of course, an important way of intervention. Lawfare, the whole concept of lawfare. A lot of the constitutions in Latin America were drawn up with funds from the World Bank and from other institutions that with ties to the United States. I mean, they paid for the renovation, so-called renovation of some of the judicial structures in many Latin American countries in the last few decades. And as a result, there are some countries that hold some structures where the judicial power is there, the judicial branch of government, to come in times where the the executive may be taking the country too far away from the U.S. Route of the U.S. Where the U.S. wants to go, and we see that we see cases, famous cases like President Lula, how he was almost, he was put in jail and tried to prevent him from going uh, uh, from being able to hold office at one point. Um, we have seen also sanctions, of course. I mean, that is the U.S. legal coercive measures are perhaps the most obvious form of this current type of use of the Monroe Doctrine, where you impose these measures that are illegal by international law, and you try again to strangle economically the countries. But you have fundamentalism as well, religious fundamentalism, as a way of exporting imperialism too. The theology of prosperity, in a way to it was a way that was something that was created in a way to diminish the influence of liberation theology, which was pushing peoples to also to support left and progressive nationalist governments. So you see, and of course, another very obvious case is the NGO type of format. You know how the U.S. also becomes, uses NGOs as a way of intervening with a so-called humanitarian type of response. And one of the most obvious cases in this in this type of intervention, of course, is Haiti, where you had the country's economy almost lost complete control over to non-governmental organizations. So within this framework, though, I think that we're now seeing a new moment of the Monroe Doctrine, a moment that has to do with the crisis of imperialism itself. And beware, because I don't like to. I don't. We always talk about, well, the empire's in crisis, and the empire's going to fall, but you know, it's still going to take a long effort for the empire to fall. And although we know that it's in crisis, although we wish is of course that it falls, we have to understand. We have to be very realist about the powers at play. And that idea of the beast that gets struck and is about to die, how it becomes more dangerous and more aggressive, and that's exactly what we're seeing. I mean, this is the age where we're speaking about the age of hyper imperialism at Tricontinental Institute. And this concept is that we're currently seeing this desperation in the way that empire works. I mean, right now, even the Monroe Doctrine is has been there's a hyper Monroe Doctrine, so to speak, with this Trump corollary, because there's no pretense now. Before, there used to be attempts at hiding the intention of what the U.S. wanted to do. And then you would mask the intentions because, oh, we're doing this because of democracy. We're doing this because of freedom. We're doing this because of humanitarian reasons. We're doing this because we're trying to stop drug trafficking, or we're trying to stop crime. No, I mean, the confession on January 3rd of the leadership of the United States was that we're in here for oil. And that's really what they did. That's what they said. That's what they did. Um, and this concept that the current U.S. administration has of peace through strength is basically saying to the international community, we really don't care about international law. Well, President Trump explicitly says he doesn't. That's not something that bothers him. He doesn't care about international law. He doesn't need international law. So that means that all that we have seen being built since the end of World War II to now, this idea of the UN Charter, of the multilateral structures, even that notion that came a bit after, where when the UN became too bureaucratic to answer to the interests of the US. So they used this idea of rule-based order, where they would actually make up the rules and implement them as they go. That's all done away with after January 3rd. After January 3rd, they said, no, we're talking about strength. So if we're strong enough and this is in our interest, we're going to do it. And if you don't like it, then you better be strong enough to fight it back. And that's really, where we're at in terms of the Monroe Doctrine. Just quickly, I just want to just give you a few points that we can probably expand in the conversation later. But I want to make sure you understand that because of the way this Monroe Doctrine is interpreted today, um, I just I need you to understand that this was a violation of international law. The attack on January 3rd is a complete violation of international law. It did away with the UN Charter. It did away with the Rome Statute because it affected places that were populated by civilians. It actually contradicted even the U.S. internal laws because this decision could have been taken without the approval of Congress. This is an act of war. That's why President Maduro, when he gets to New York, the first thing he says, "I am the president of Venezuela. I am a prisoner of war, and I was kidnapped." And this is important for us to understand what we're actually dealing with. Okay. Second of all, I need to, I want to express this that I think it is important because for a long time, even parts of the left had a lot of doubts and criticisms on President Maduro, and a lot of these criticisms and doubts come from from idealizing what a revolutionary process is, and I think all revolutionary processes take place in their own conditions. Like Marx says, we are to transform history, but we were supposed to do them in the conditions that we get. And those are the conditions that Bolivarian revolution had. And those were very complicated conditions. And we have had to undergo a very traumatic process, which is fighting this blockade, this aggression for over 10 years now. And sometimes there will be criticism on the left for why is Maduro doing this, or why is he talking to the private sector? And I think that people really missed the fact that he is a working class president. He is a union leader. He was somebody that stood up against empire. He is somebody that did, with the conditions that we had, with the possibilities that we have, whatever was possible to not allow a neoliberal model to be implemented in Venezuela, and to have a safety net for people to survive and to continue on their daily lives, not the least affected as possible. So I think it's important to say this because the demonization of President Maduro has been part of a media campaign by the empire for many years now. And the way, particularly this year, that they accuse of being drug trafficker and head of a crime organization, all these things you see were part of the buildup so that they can justify the intervention they wanted to do to get control of the oil. And if President Maduro had been such a neoliberal president, or the way that sometimes some of the criticism gets pointed out, well, they would have needed to come in and do what they did, and take them, kidnap them, and do what they did. The fact that they actually went to the extreme of doing this shows that he was defending a revolutionary project, again, under very difficult conditions, under several contradictions, but in the way that it was possible to do. I also want to make sure that you understand that the fact that the Bolivarian Revolution was radical in its deep building of people's power and a strong bond between government and people. Again, of course, with difficulties, contradictions, but there is a very strong bond between people and the government, and there's a very heightened consciousness that allowed us to survive this moment in time. Because you see, the United States has bombed Venezuela, has kidnapped the president, but they were not able to put the right wing into government. They were not able to put somebody in the army to lead Venezuela that was, that was supporting the empire. The Bolivarian Revolution is still in place and is still controlling the government, and that is bizarre. It's incredible because I would every time we imagine this possible scenario, because we all imagine that this was possible. We imagine that we would be in a night like this, we would be hiding, we would be probably, been taken to jail or something. And we didn't imagine that what would happen was that we would have such a strong people-based movement that we would be able to resist this attack. And the fact that today, all of the leadership of the Bolivarian Revolution, the civil leadership, the political parties that are around the revolution, the communes, the social movements, the military, everyone that has a role to play in this political process has close ranks in support of acting President Delcy Rodriguez and in support of the revolution, shows cohesion and shows that we were right to be so radical as to, do a real transformation process in society, because that was going to guarantee that we didn't have divisions and doubts in a moment of pressure like this. I'll leave it at this because I know I want to hear, of course, Jorge.
Yeah.
But thank you very much for this opportunity, and we'll
thank you,
discuss
Carlos.
more.
We've got there's going to be questions after both speakers, so stay around. So thank you, Carlos. I really liked the contrast between the Monroe Doctrine and Simón Bolívar. I think that is brilliant. So thank you for putting that forward. Now, Jorge Vilalta, over to you.
Thank you. Hola, Carlos. Un abrazo, camarada. Hi, Rurik. I saw what you texted. Ria and Ryan is connected from the US. Thank you for the invitation, comrades. Good afternoon to you on that side of the world. We want to thank especially Red Spark and all the organizations and individuals who stand in solidarity with Venezuela. We have been seeing you at the demonstrations and protests, and we are very grateful and moved for it. We would also like to thank you for the opportunity to talk right now and tell you our story, which is nothing like the story told by imperialist governments and the hegemonic media. We are living through probably the most difficult time humanity has seen since Second World War. It's no coincidence that the protagonists of this suffering are the same as 80 years ago, the fascists. The configuration of capitalism as the dominant system, imperialism as a method, and fascism as a weapon against the people, it's unprecedented in human history. My comrade Carlos just explained the basics of Monroe Doctrine, which is, as you know, it's a colonial, racist, classist, and expansionist doctrine that in reality has provided guidance, like perpetual guidance to the US state in oppressing the peoples and governments of the American continent for the last 2 centuries. But I want to move forward and speak about the opposite, the extreme opposite of the doctrine Monroe, which is the Bolivarian doctrine, which is the guidance of the Bolivarian Revolution and some of the people in Latin America and the Caribbean that are struggling for our second independence. Basically, the Bolivarian doctrine was developed by Simón Bolívar, the Liberator, from his theoretical postulates. But not only was Simón Bolívar, the Liberator, but also his teacher, Simón Rodriguez, and Ezequiel Zamora, which is kind of the hero of the peasants of Venezuela. And it has been continuously nourished by the thinking of some other great leaders and intellectuals in the Latin American and Caribbean region. What we're going to do right now is to share some of those postulates and give you some examples of how this theory was put into practice in this 21st century by the Bolivarian Revolution. As you know, Bolivar was a big defender of social justice and equality. he spoke for the universal education, saying that it was necessary for the political struggle for the freedom of the peoples, as well as equal civil and political rights for all of the people. He also maintained that the state should guarantee the material conditions, not in these terms, obviously, but that's how we understand it in this time, that the state should guarantee the material conditions, such as housing, for example, work, education, and health for all the people. Regarding to this, the Bolivarian Revolution put it into practice in these years. Through a constitutional process unprecedented in our country, a call was made and national elections were held in 1999 for our new constitution. A constitution that recognizes indigenous people. I have to say that even if Venezuela is South American and Latin American people, we have very few indigenous people, it's like 800,000 people. Most of us are mixed people, as you know, but the origin people, even if they are few compared to our neighbors, Venezuela has one of the most advanced laws for protecting the original people in the entire continent. For example, the indigenous people in Venezuela were recognized as part of the liberation wars, as part of the independence. In the struggle for the independence of the country, but also the Constitution gave them rights to own and administer their ancestral lands, respecting their methods of politics and obviously their ancestral practices like medicine or feeding or education. Our Constitution also declares housing to be a basic human right. We are one of the few countries in the world where this is the case, where housing is a human right. And we have done it, like the Bolivarian government has built 5 million homes in recent years. And some of you that has come to Venezuela have already seen that there is no housing crisis in Venezuela, like in almost every other country in the world. About social justice and equality, it is worth mentioning that Hugo Chavez and the Bolivarian Revolution, especially the commander Chavez, was the first president of Venezuela to recognize the existence of the poor, of the working class in Venezuela, giving them visibility, access to opportunities, and a leading role in political decision and making. National income was redistributed to the entire population, and the Bolivarian Revolution is building a state that is communal in nature, where political orientation comes from the grassroots. We are trying to dismantle the bourgeoisie state that was a consequence of European colonization, and we are trying to build a communal state which is not built from the top to the bottom, but from the bases to the top. That was something that never existed. You will see a lot of Venezuelan right-wing people saying that the dictatorship and all this narrative, which is, by the way, Washington's narrative, but the reality, it's in our territory. The reality, it's completely different. If you go out to tomorrow, Saturday, even if it's a Saturday, in Venezuela, you will see the vast majority of the country participating and playing a leading role in assemblies, meetings, mobilizations, where decisions are made, and that decisions have an impact, on their territories. They administrate the territories where they live. They make the political decisions that are going to be considered in, for example, the regional government or the national government. So it's not only participating in the politics of the country, it's being protagonist of the building of a new state and following the Bolivarian project that we are heading on. Some of the other postulates of Bolivar, for example, were the anti-imperialism, the independence and self-determinations of the peoples. As you know, Bolivar is called the liberator because the only time in history that the Venezuelan army left its borders was to liberate 6 countries from the Spanish Empire: Venezuela, Colombia, Panama, Ecuador, Peru, and Bolivia, and to create one, the Republic of Florida. Probably nobody knows about the Republic of Florida, but it did existed. Bolivar was the precursor of anti-imperialism. In 1829, he coined the famous phrase, the United States seems destined by the providence to plague America with misery in the name of liberty. Our Bolivar, it's the symbol of independence, and our people have this historical background, ambition that everyone, all the peoples should be free. And our government has followed that course, in respect for the sovereignty of the countries, non-interference in internal affairs, and the self-determination of peoples are the compass for all the policies of the Bolivarian Revolution. We have been facilitators of the peace process in Colombia, for example. We have denounced and fought every coup d'etat, blockade, Yankee military threat, and intervention in the affairs of the countries of America. We also nationalized our strategic resources, which now serve to feed our people, not corporations. And just, Bolivar and the Chavista people in Venezuela understands that peace and independence are sustained by fighting. Our oppressors will never give us a minute's peace. We have to fight for the independence, not only the independence of a country or a project, because Bolivar also said and spoke for the Latin American integration. When we have the convening of the Panama Congress, Bolivar invited the governments of the Latin American region to participate in a confederation of southern states that could confront northern imperialism. Bolivar already saw as a threat not only European monarchies, but also the US government and state as a threat. So Bolivar tried to organize this confederation for stand against them. And Gran Colombia was the first successful experiment in this matter, united several liberated territories under a single state, which was Gran Colombia. The liberator understood that there can be no peace and freedom if neighbors are still slaves, if they are not emancipated themselves and united to fight. In this sense, the Bolivarian Revolution was very efficient when we have the means to do so. Venezuela conceptualized, funded, and created various mechanisms for regional integration that transcended the simple commercial integration of the unity processes that exist on various continents. To mention a few, the Community of Latin American and Caribbean States, CELAC, was created to generate space for unity, for participating in this community, which was looking for unity, complementarity, and integration among 33 of the 35 countries of the American continent, without the interference from the United States and Canada. Okay. the current organism that exists is the OAS, and it's as you already probably should know, it's just for interfering. It's used by Washington for interfering in our national affairs. So CELAC was an effort for getting U.S. imperialism out of the decisions of the American continent. Some other examples of the Bolivarian Revolution building unity and integration could be the Union of South American Nations, UNASUR, to develop the integration of our countries in areas as diverse as culture, military, the defense of democracy, and economic integration among the 12 founding South American countries which belong to that mechanism. Some other examples, Petrocaribe was specifically defined for energy integration, in which Venezuela supplied oil to countries that doesn't have oil in the Caribbean region at low cost, with no interest and on long-term credit. That was a very successful mechanism for not only integrating the continent and the region, but also for solidarity from the Venezuelan people and government and revolution to the Caribbean peoples. There are lots of them, but I'm trying to summarize the most important, which, by the way, are still in existence. They are weakened because of everything that has happened in the recent years, but they still exist, and we are still participating in them. Okay. Another example of it could be the Bolivarian Allegiance for the Peoples of Our America, ALBA, founded by Venezuela and Cuba for the peoples of Latin America and the Caribbean to promote independence, self-determination, and the comprehensive development of their peoples through solidarity, economic complementarity, and cooperation. It is a new mechanism at world level. It's new because the exchange between our countries was done with labor or work, or exchanging not just with money or resources, but also with all of this I'm speaking of. For example, we were sending oil to Cuba, and they paid us with doctors that help us to develop our health programs in Venezuela, or I don't know, sports coaches, sport coaches. Cuba has a lot of development in health and sports and some other things, and we pay them with oil. And also they send other kind of, for example, professionals in some other areas. But the thing is that the Bolivarian thought and doctrine is extensive. We have only mentioned some aspects of it, but if you are, for those who are interested in learning more about this topic, we are sharing the Blue Book in English. It's an important book written by Hugo Chavez with a foreword by Nicolás Maduro, which contains the basic contents of the Bolivarian Revolution and the Bolivarian Doctrine. We are recommended for newcomers to read it. We also recommend, by the way, we are seeing that the videos we are seeing are from the series Chavez the Radical. It's important. It's a audiovisual series that explains some of these Bolivarian postulates and how Chavez and the Bolivarian Revolution developed them through the years. Thank you, Ria. Ria just sent it. I don't know. We can speak further about this. I think that we should, for example, mention The Carlos spoke about a pre-socialist thought in Bolivar, and we have seen the anti-imperialism, the united of the people, the self-determination of the peoples. Bolivar also spoke, for example, for economical independence. He was referring to Europe by the time, but that was the same logical thinking that Chavez used for example, redistributing the wealth, the oil wealth that Venezuelan had, and take us to a better economical and material conditions for being able to do everything that I just spoke. I have three I remember three numbers which I think that you should, everything should be analyzed and should be searched, because we are living in in the post-truth world with 99% of the things that we receive, the information we receive, it's fake. But for the year 2014, Venezuela was in GDP, in total GDP, Venezuela was in 2014, Venezuela was the fourth richest country in Latin America and the Caribbean. This is International Monetary Fund data, okay? This is not invented by Jorge. You can check it. 2014 data from the International Monetary Institution. We were the fourth richest country. The first was Brazil, the second was Mexico, and we were almost tied in third place with Argentina. As you know, those three countries are way bigger in territory and population than ours. If you check at the same information, you will see that GDP per capita we were the second richest country in 2014. Only second, just after Uruguay. And according to the United Nations, by 2014, we were the most equal country in the entire American continent in the terms of material conditions, and everything related to education, health, access to opportunities, and some other matters. So what happened in 2014, after 2014? What happened was the infamous Obama decree. Nobel Prize Obama was the one that launched the blockade against Venezuela, even if sanctions started just before the infamous decree where Obama said Venezuela is a threat for U.S. National security and blah, blah, blah. That was like the starting point of the blockade. And yeah, the U.S. government saw that we were doing all this politics and programs for America and the world, and that we were really a threat for not only for the United States but for capitalism. We were building a new socialist project with the guidance and the doctrine of Bolivar as a guide. We were solidarity and working together with all the governments and the free peoples of the global South. And yeah, they had to diminish our influence as much as they can. And the blockade served for those purposes. You already know what happened after that. But I'm not only speaking about the material conditions that were diminished, but also the anti-Venezuelan campaign that we have been suffering since day one, since Chavez, since 1999. But we have to say that the hardest part of that campaign started with President Maduro. Venezuelan people, which by the way, we have 29 to 30% of our population, which comes from other countries. We are, as Australia, we are an immigrant country. We have received millions of people, like historically, millions of people from Latin America and the Caribbean. And we also received about 1 million people from the European countries after World War II. So Venezuelan, which has been an immigration hotspot since ever, was emigrating from Venezuela for the first time in history because of the worsening material conditions inside of the country since 2014. And we were targeted by the US government and media for a hate campaign. Everything that has been speaking about Venezuela, it's a lie. From Cartel de los Soles, which you already know, it's a lie, to say that every Venezuelan is a delinquent, as Maria Corina recently said, by the way. She said like 60% of the Venezuelan are thugs or something. You know, we have been, and that has, when you are bombarded in the public opinion permanently, and people are not politically educated, they will start to understand and settle that information, and that transforms. That's not only public opinion; it becomes then part of the common sense. I'm speaking about the Gramscian common sense. That has happened in the peoples of Latin America. Most of the people, not the leftist people. Venezuela, it's like I'm sorry for the word, but Venezuela, it's like a shithole governed by this murderous dictatorship where everything is wrong. And it's a lie. You know, we some of you have come to Venezuela and have seen the real conditions of our country. But that campaign is what permitted what has happened with Venezuela. Nowadays, that's why you find progressive forces saying that Maduro was captured, he was not kidnapped, or oh no, they bombarded Venezuela. Oh, that's not good. No, it's an invasion, and we have been under threat. We have been suffering coups d'etat. We have been suffering military invasions. We have been suffering blockades. We have been suffering guarimbas, which is kind of what's happening today in Iran, by the way. We have been suffering for all these attacks from imperialism, and then you have a people which is doubting of the Venezuelan people, its government, and the Bolivarian revolution. So this campaign allows that to happen right now. We have been defenestrated. We have been the global north has been lying about us all this year, and we are suffering the consequences right now. I know that we are going to for the questions part. I just want to say that we have to awake people. Like we are 2 minutes before midnight, comrades. The imperialist offensive, it's reshaping the world to bring us into a totalitarian fascist regime governed from Washington, and just Venezuela, it's on the front line of this oppression and recolonization project. Right now, there are no half measures, comrade. There are no shades of gray. Either we fight them, or we will be complicit in a future of slavery for our children. Do we want to leave this world to the next generations? I don't think so. I think that today defending Palestine, Cuba, or Venezuela means defending the possibility of life on Earth, the possibility of a diverse free and peaceful future. We Venezuelans have been fighting against this through the past 200 years, mostly on this 21st century, but in the past 200 years. And we call on all the peoples of the world to rise up and fight, because we know that united we will win, we will prevail. Venezuela and the Bolivarian Revolution are standing and are fighting against them. We have an historical project called Bolivarianism, a mass movement called Chavismo, and a socialist horizon that we are already building through the communal state. Our commitment is that we will continue to fight with all our capabilities and all of our strength. No one here has given up or will give up, okay? We will prevail, and down with imperialism, long live the Bolivarian Revolution, long live the free peoples of the world, we shall overcome.
Thank you so much, George. That's fantastic message for all of us to become more active and to start building solidarity with the Venezuelan people, the Venezuelan Revolution. I think we've got a little video that George wanted us to watch. We'll go to that now.
Chávez radical. Los consejos comunales debemos trascender ahora lo local y debemos ir creando por ley, en primer lugar, una especie de confederación regional, local, nacional de consejos comunales. Tenemos que ir marchando hacia la conformación de un Estado comunal, y el viejo Estado burgués que todavía vive, que está vivito y coleando, tenemos que irlo desmontando progresivamente, mientras vamos levantando el Estado comunal, el Estado socialista, el Estado bolivariano. Un Estado que esté en condiciones y en capacidad de conducir una revolución. Casi todos los Estados nacieron para detener revoluciones. Vaya que reto es nuestro, convertir al viejo Estado contrarrevolucionario en un Estado revolucionario. Tengo la fórmula clara, es de Bolívar. Ustedes lo saben, esta tremenda señal esclarecedora de lo que tenemos que hacer. Es del año 1826. Cada palabra es una luz, es un rayo, es un faro. Nada es tan conforme con las doctrinas populares como el consultar a la nación en masa sobre los puntos capitales en que se fundan los estados, las leyes fundamentales y el magistrado supremo. Todos los particulares están sujetos al error o a la seducción, pero no así el pueblo, que posee en grado eminente la conciencia de su bien y la medida de su independencia. De este modo, su juicio es puro, su voluntad fuerte, y por consiguiente nadie puede corromperlo, ni menos intimidarlo. Yo tengo pruebas irrefragables del tino del pueblo en las grandes resoluciones, y por eso es que siempre he preferido sus opiniones a las opiniones de los sabios. Los consejos comunales tienen que trascender lo local.
Excellent. So I encourage people that want to ask questions, please feel free to ask any question you want. I think we need clarity. This is part of our own education. So I encourage people to indicate on the chat if you want to ask a question. You don't have to put the question there, just indicate that you want to ask a question. And we'll take 3 questions or comments. These 2 speakers will be brilliant at answering any question, any doubts, anything that you've seen on the media that you find questionable or you're not sure about. This is the space to ask those questions. So please, I'll wait for some people to put the hand emoji on the chat so then we can start with the questions. Has anyone heard? Okay, we've got one question. Sorry. So we've got Marcus. We'll go to Marcus and hopefully everyone will warm up. Go, Marcus.
Thanks, Julia, and thanks, Carlos and Jorge, for the presentations. They were really informative. One of the things that I've been worried about has been the organisation of the opposition at this time. And I just was reading some news from Mission Verdad on Telegram today that Delcy Rodriguez and the Chavista government convened a program for coexistence and peace yesterday in Caracas. And at that program, as part of that program, they had a 100-day plan for peace, economic peace, social peace, and political peace. And Delcy talked about the 626 opposition who were released from prison, and she made a point that that figure had been grossly exaggerated in the media. One of the things that I was wondering about, and I was hoping you could provide some information on, was how well organised the opposition are at this moment. What are they actually doing? I'm not seeing a lot of signs since the very first 48 hours after the kidnapping. I'm not seeing a lot of signs of the opposition organising. And when I read through the proceedings of the program for coexistence and peace, I noticed that Delcy was trying to distinguish between two different types of opposition. Like one opposition she described as being extremist and saying that they were essentially apolitical or anti-political. And she was saying that they were essentially enabling the US nuclear armed superpower to conduct military action in the country. And then on the other hand, she said there was the opposition who just disagree with the Bolivarian government. So I'm wondering, have you seen any signs of either of those oppositions organising? And yeah, I have other questions, but I'll just leave it at that for now. Thank you very much.
We'll actually get two more questions. Barry and Rurik. Barry first.
Yes. Look, Jorge and Carlos, thank you very, very much for taking the time to talk to us from the other side of the planet. It's absolutely essential for us in Australia to hear from you what's really going on. This is the second webinar that I've attended this week about Venezuela. On Wednesday night, I attended one that was addressed by a research professor who works at a university controlled by, it's run by the US military. And this man he was one of the most cynical and evil people I have ever heard speak in my entire life. He's a total unquestioning supporter of Donald Trump. And the things he said about Venezuela were it was just an avalanche of lies. One of the things he said was that the communal councils and the colectivos are all drug rings. They're all criminal outfits like the mafia. That's just one of the slanders that he said. But he did say something. He said it 3 times. I noted it. He said he described what Donald Trump has done to Venezuela as a shakedown. He used that term, a shakedown. That's what the mafia do. And so he was admitting out loud that what the United States is doing is just a criminal act to get hold of Venezuela's oil. But I noticed yesterday on the Australian Broadcasting Commission news website, they had a very long article talking about what they said is a torture center in Caracas run by the government. I've never heard of this place. Apparently it was originally built as a supermarket or something. I don't know. But this was a highly detailed article. And I'd just like to hear from from you comrades what is the truth of this matter. At the moment, I don't have anything to answer this thing with.
Rick?
Yeah, in a similar sort of vein, just to let the comrades know, I mean, one of the things I guess that we face in Australia is a relatively significant left, or at least liberal left and radical left, really, who in one way or another effectively criticize the Bolivarian revolution. And so they have the sort of pretense of an anti-imperialism, but what happens is it gets undermined by claims like the one that Barry just mentioned. And I wanted to ask in particular just what Carlos or Jorge what they would sort of say about a particular argument I had recently. So I was talking to somebody on the left in Australia who was talking about the national elections and the fact that the opposition purportedly have all these results coming from specific electoral booths, because the Venezuelan system, is extremely rigorous, and that shows a significant support for the opposition, or effectively the argument they were making was that Maduro stole the election. And so we got into kind of a debate and about generalities and things. And I mean, as an aside, I was lucky enough to go with one of our comrades to Venezuela recently and meet Jorge and see the communal projects and to see the reality on the ground, and to see the fact that there is no housing crisis and all those sorts of things. So the person I was arguing with, so had none of that, but had really this kind of argument that they'd got from the certainly from the mainstream about, well, the actual results weren't released. The actual results of the election, last national election weren't released. And what do you think is the best kind of argument against that? And what do you think? Yeah, what would you advise as a sort of position in defense of the Bolivarian revolution against that type of argument?
So, yeah, it's linked to the second question too. I think that there's a difference between political prisons and there's a difference between political prison and a political which is in prison because it is a delinquent. Okay, DLC confirmed that we have been. I think it's 600 people that are now in the streets. But personally, I don't agree that some of them should be on the streets, because these are not people that were detained because they were protesting against the government. All of those people were liberated. These are people which are ultra-right. Some of them, not all of them. Some of them are ultra-right faces that are going to... I think right now the threat is that they are going to organize the comanditos. The comanditos, Maria Corina Machado, it's a person that does not really exist in Venezuela. Like she was built like Guaido from the United States, but she does not have the support that she claims she had. Well, Trump said it, but we shouldn't. I can't believe that we believe a word that Trump says. But that's the only thing that he said that it was true. The thing is that the only reason why they haven't nuked us, it's because we have the Chavismo, which is a mass movement that that spreads through all the country. We have political and territorial control of Venezuela, and they need us. They need our oil. That's the main reason. So what is the U.S. trying to do right now? I don't know if you know this, but all the political leaders of the revolution has been threatened directly by missile them if they don't follow the directions of the United States government. That's the real situation. Under that framework, within that framework, you have now the possibility that the United States are going to again fund fascist forces within Venezuela to make us lose control of the territory and the government. That's a possibility. Another thing that I want to add to this reply of the question is that this year is going to be decisive for not only the Bolivarian Revolution, but all the American continent. We have several general elections in the continent. Next month is Costa Rica, which is not like relevant, nor Peru, but we do have general elections in Colombia. This year, we have general elections in Brazil, and we have midterms election in the United States. Those three elections are going to sadly have an impact on Venezuela directly, because as you know, two of our three frontier lines are Brazil and Colombia. And that's something we have secure right now with Petro and Lula. That could change. Imagine the situation if we have guarimbas throughout the territory, which is these comanditos of Maria Corina that I have been telling you. And then you have a right-wing government in Colombia or Brazil. That's going to be very difficult. So I think that it could be, I know that this is a part of the negotiation, but don't forget what I just told you. There is a plan to start creating focus of territorial terrorism within Venezuela, and it's going to happen very soon. Carlos?
See, I mean, I think Jorge laid out very important ideas. With regards to how the opposition here is organized, I think you have to understand that the opposition has lost credibility within its own base. And this has been the result of year after year promising, some sort of change, action, things that would happen that never happened. So it was already difficult for them to build, trust in their own base. And now, I mean, what really I think completely disbanded their chances is that they started asking for sanctions first and then for the intervention. See, on the day on January 3rd, there was nobody on the streets here celebrating what had happened. And that's not, obviously there's a lot of people here that didn't support President Maduro. I mean, obviously this is, it's a democratic country. We have an opposition, but nobody was celebrating. The only people you actually saw celebrating were people that don't live in Venezuela. And that is another issue. I mean, that's another problem. We have a diaspora who has, for different reasons, adopted a more, more of a radical stance in support of the opposition. But that's outside, and that has little impact in Venezuela. The opposition in Venezuela here, mostly of the opposition, even though they may disagree with President Maduro or with the government, nobody wanted the country to be attacked. So on the day of the attack, what you had was some really a sense of outrage, sadness, and demoralized opposition that couldn't come out of the street. I mean, the fact that Trump really, threw Maria Corina under the bus when he said, she can't lead because she doesn't have the popularity or the legitimacy to be the leader. Well, that calls into question what happened with the 80% of the votes that they won, about a year ago? I mean, didn't they claim to have won the election with the 80% of the votes, and they had all these? See, you realize then that first that was never true, because I don't know, statistically, if you think about these things, but a country that has, I mean, I remember when President Chavez won the first time, which was a huge celebration. He barely, I mean, he made a little above 50%, and the country was going to fall apart. It was like everybody was just on the street, excited, celebrating. It was this huge. I mean, there's no way you could have 80% of the votes, and then nobody is there. Nobody in the streets to say anything, to do anything. It was really, they went too far in the way they portrayed their supposed leadership, to the extent that the U.S. also believed a lot of what they said and supported them, and then realized that when the moment came that it wasn't true, so they couldn't support her, because it was all made up and blown out of proportion. So what happens with the opposition today is that they're really having a very hard time to come together, because how do you come together after you called for an invasion, and then people underwent the attack, and the leadership that called for that live outside of Venezuela? It's really terrible for them. The other opposition, that is a nationalistic opposition, again, that they're not socialists, they don't believe in socialism, but they don't want the country to be bombed, and they want the country to continue to be strong and independent. That opposition is coming together with the government to take these stance of national unity, working together. Let's find a way. Let's see what happens. And you have to understand that, because of the gravity of the situation, how the seriousness of the situation, like Jorge said, it's really a hard place for the government to be at. And, we know that we can't defeat, the Venezuela can't defeat militarily the U.S. That's not going to happen. I mean, no matter how, that doesn't mean we're not courageous. That doesn't mean we didn't put up a fight. No. That just means that there's a country that spends about $1 trillion a year on, weapons and military technology, and then and we're a normal country that, had some weapons for self-defense, but we're trying to do other things. So we can't, confront them militarily. What is our weapon? Our weapon has to be diplomacy. Our weapon has to be reopen those channels of communication that were closed, and let's try and let's sit and let's work this out, and let's see how we can manage to hold back another attack. Because this is a life threatening situation, and I think here is where I think you see an important unity between that opposition that wants to save the country, that wants to maintain an independent country, does not want to become a colony, and the government that has also, trying to take Venezuela in its own independent path. I think there's a sense of unity now to try to find common ground and hold back the aggression of the United States and hold back the aggression of imperialism. That's not an easy task. That's obviously going to bring us some problems and tough decisions. But it's the way we can deal with the current situation that we have now.
I'll go for the next 3 questions that I see on the chat, and I know there's some other people that have put their hands up, so I'll get to you guys as well. But Ruby, Ria, and Joe Montero. Ruby first.
Thanks, Julia. Thanks both of the speakers as well. It's been super informative. I have a question regarding how, because there's such class consciousness within the mass response in Venezuela, and you've got a history within socialist countries of really rallying behind other countries when there is a threat, particularly from the US. Cuba has had such a strong role in supporting other countries with imperialist threat. Because the strength at the moment globally is with China, in terms of being able to create connections and trade, and circumvent some of the sanctions that the US is imposing. It also then seems to have a policy of non-intervention in these scenarios. So does that rub people the wrong way, or is that not the case perhaps? Because I know that there's been a big shipment of rice to Cuba, for example. So there is, I mean, that's just one thing that I've seen in terms of a solidarity action, given that this is also an attack on Cuba. Has this been something that the Chinese, in terms of relations, have they kind of pulled back, or have they maintained it and stood by it? Are they trying to be apolitical? Like, how is it coming across in the people on the ground as well? Thank you.
Thank you, Ruby. Ria?
Hi, thank you for the introductions, which I think really showed how Bolivarianism, with its socialist and anti-imperialist basis, really is the complete opposite to, and really the antidote of imperialism, where instead of having war and destruction and the looting and plunder of resources, you have instead cooperation and solidarity and regional integration. And that's why imperialism wants to control Venezuela, not only because of its oil, but to destroy the Bolivarian revolution and the example that it sets. And these ideas from Bolivar and Rodriguez Zamora, also Cuba's Jose Marti, were really developed in the 21st century and put into practice by Hugo Chavez and Fidel Castro. And some of the examples that Jorge gave with regards to CELAC, I was wondering if the speakers could expand a bit more on some of the grassroots internationalist initiatives of the 21st century, like ALBA Movimientos, for example, and whether since the 3rd of January, you've seen much grassroots solidarity from across Latin America in support of the Bolivarian Revolution and Venezuelan sovereignty.
We'll take, thank you, Ria. I think it's Joe Montero.
Yeah, Carlos and Jorge, thank you. Gracias for your presentation, so fantastic. My question relates to the importance, suppose which was referred by both of you to international movement against imperialism, US imperialism, and the changing balance of forces. We are part of that, of course, in this country. We're a long way away, but like other countries, we have a problem of division and an inability to come together, which is a rising question here. How do we overcome this? I understand Venezuela had to overcome the same problem. Could you expand on how Venezuela tackled this issue?
Carlos, do you want to go first and then Jorge?
Sure. So on the China issue, I would say that, I think that China has taken a strong position in rejection of what the United States has done. And China has already taken, they made important statements. They took a strong position at the Security Council. But I also think that sometimes we have this, we expect that countries like China or Russia or some of our friends are going to come out and to some sort of direct confrontation with the U.S. And I think there's many reasons for that not to happen. In particular, because at this, I mean, the reckless way in which the United States is acting, you don't want to escalate any type of conflict where that could really lead to something like a nuclear confrontation. It's not going to happen with Venezuela, but it could happen with China. I think both have over the last several years have been patient and have taken a lot of measures to avoid that type of confrontation. But at the same time, I think Venezuela has so not expect anything than what we have received in that sense. I believe, I think the support in the international law atmosphere, I think in the multilateral actions, in a way they treatment, I think has been, what Venezuela expected it to be, and I think has been supportive. I think what Ria was commenting on, or is that the international solidarity? I think we've seen a lot of international solidarity. Even, right away. Hours after the attack happened, we saw people in India, for example, marching and taking the streets and protesting. We saw that, called me from Colombia, come by bus to Venezuela from one organization, PUPSOC, and were here and accompanied us for a couple of days. So I think there's been a lot of movement. Also, at the same time, we have to understand that all of Latin America is in some sort of struggle right now. We obviously, Venezuela is perhaps the case that is currently more alarming because of the bombardment. But like we discussed, Cuba is under a very horrible situation, and Cuba did a massive popular demonstration also because 32 Cuban internationals were murdered by the invading forces here. But today there was a massive demonstration also in Salvador, in Brazil, during the MST's anniversary, and they did a strong demonstration. But you see a lot of our comrades in Latin America are also facing hardships. You have extreme right governments now in Argentina and Ecuador, Panama. They've been very repressive with the popular movements. One is likely coming to Chile as well. We're seeing that there's a hardship for the popular movement to do more in these times of adversity. It's a very complicated time for Latin America. Even though even so, we have felt that there's been a tremendous display of solidarity. People who have been very supportive of the Bolivarian revolution. Jorge.
Gracias, hermano. Yeah, I completely agree with what Carlos just said. I just want us to locate in the world we're living right now. International relations are pragmatic, comrades, are not ideological. No country is going to go on war against another country because of ideological coincidences. China, I'm going to say what Carlos cannot say, okay? China, it's not going to go out of their frontiers unless they are threatened on the rebel Taipei province. So we kind of knew, and Russia, it's very busy waging a war against NATO on Ukraine. Iran, it's resisting against the Zionist regime of Israel. And basically, as Carlos said, our continent right now is struggling against this neo-fascist wave that has been attacking us. So we were not I think that at some degree we were not expecting them to do more than what they do, like reject the kidnapping and the bombing, and in an international system, which by the law, by the way, it's agonizing as international law. It's agonizing. Everything that all this, the international system that they created before Second World War was designed for maintaining the status quo of the powers of the world, not for attending the needs of the peoples of the world. That's the reality of it. I know that we have to have a framework of laws and an assembly of the peoples of the world that could get to common principles and laws that we could work together. But right now that's not existing. The UN, it's doing nothing about what has been the mass murder, the genocide in Palestine. And they are not going to do a thing about Venezuela. So that's the reality of it. We have to understand that we are not counting. I know that we have to try all the diplomacy ways to solve this conflict, but I think it's the time of the people. Right now, the diplomacy of the peoples, this same conversation that we are having right now, it's against that, it's fighting that fascism that tries to impose in the world. We have to fight back. We have to organize. It's the people of the world that it's going to reverse the situation and and struggle against global North imperialism. Regarding to grassroots, Carlos did a very good resume a synthesis about that, but I want to focus on the Colombian Brigade. Carlos already spoke. We belong to all these platforms. ALBA, grassroots, and ALBA, the integration mechanism I spoke about a while ago. It also has the grassroots expression, and it's called ALBA Movimientos, like grassroots ALBA. So it's a American. When I say American, I'm referring to a continent, comrades, okay? It's an American platform that has more than 400 organizations. And we are also working with the People's International Assembly, which is way bigger. It's worldwide. And we have all these Venezuelan solidarities networks around the continent. And they have been mobilizing and they have been protesting against what happened recently. But I want to focus on the Colombian Brigade. Carlos told us these comrades, the brigades are not programmed. The first brigades were in World War II when the Spanish dictator Franco started murdering people which were not from the Castile region. And what I'm trying to say is that brigades are not planned. Brigades are the people that are organizing throughout the world to go fighting against imperialism or fascism. And that's the reality we're going to live in. These Colombian comrades, it was in a spontaneous brigade. They saw that we were bombarded, and a few days later they organized and they came with their buses, and a lot of people came, by the way. And they drove across all of Colombia. They came from almost the frontier with Ecuador. So they have to go through Colombia and then half Venezuela to reach to Caracas. And this is important because it is a self-funded and spontaneous brigade that came not only because it's important for our people to see that there are people from another country that are in solidarity with Venezuela, and giving them a hug and seeing how we are working in the communities for recovering of this invasion. but it's also important because these are Bolivarian comrades that came to say, we are together in this. We are not letting Venezuela be attacked alone. The Bolivarian project is alive, and we are going to defeat the imperialists as we did together 200 years ago. So that's very important for us, and we expect some day that an Australian brigade will come to Venezuela too. I think that those were the first two questions. I think that there's one left. Julia?
I'm not, look, we have 3 more people that want to ask questions, or 4 more people. Would that work for you guys? Can you answer 3 or 4 more questions? I know that everyone must be very tired. So we'll go to Ryan and then Carl, Iggy, and there's one other person that has put their hand up called Team Diamond. So can we go to Ryan first? Ryan?
Yeah. Can you hear me? Okay,
Yes.
wonderful. Thanks for doing this, and thanks Carlos and Jorge, of course. There's we're also here, I think, rising up in the US. I know we had in my little town, Springfield, Missouri, a protest of over 75 people. The morning we all found out that Nicolás Maduro was kidnapped. And it happened in over 100 cities and towns across the nation that weekend. And, just today, tens of thousands were out in the street, and it was minus 30 degrees Celsius in Minneapolis, condemning ICE for their murders and their heinous actions in the streets, terrorizing our communities and our neighbors. And the people are waking up, Donald Trump even had to recognize that the Iraq War was for oil when he was in the Republican debates in 2016 against Jeb Bush. And people very much know what this exactly is. And people are beginning to wake up. But there still is a lot of propaganda here. Of course, it's heavy here in the Imperial Core. And I wanted to, yesterday there was a deal of $300 billion that Delcy Rodriguez has apparently signed with the United States. I just kind of wanted to see how you all were interpreting this deal, because there seems to be a lot of confusion here. I don't really see it as a win for the Trump administration like some leftists are saying here. But I just wanted to hear what you all had to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Kyle, did you want to ask your question, or do you want me to read it out? Is Kyle still here? He might have left. Okay, let's go to Iggy. Iggy?
Hi, thanks very much. Yeah, great presentations. Just a few questions. Hopefully I'll try and be as concise as possible. Obviously, we're all here in support of the Venezuelan revolution. We're all here, in opposition to the abduction of Maduro and what the US is doing. And obviously the most urgent task for all of us is building a united front, against the imperialist attack. And it seems to me that an important component of that is the need to, in building that sort of united front solidarity, especially abroad and especially in more distant places like Australia, is to sufficiently be able to engage with a lot of the left criticisms that are coming up about the current Venezuelan government's responses to what was effectively an act of war. And of course, none of us here, I don't think anyone in the solidarity, anyone in support of and in opposition to what Washington did, I don't think any of us are thinking that Venezuela should wage some sort of military response or go to war with the world's hegemon. But there are lots of left, ranging across the left, questions and qualms about the current Venezuelan government's responses. I hear what Carlos was saying about the importance of diplomacy, but diplomacy has to be transparent and it has to be clearly part of a strategy If you look at what the Bolsheviks did, for instance, at Brest-Litovsk, the advocacy of open, transparent diplomatic engagement with imperialists, that is clearly honest and transparent. And I'm just wondering, what that diplomacy is potentially leading to for the Delcy Rodriguez government. For instance, does it extend as far as meeting, for 2 hours with the director of the CIA? And I'm not sure what the contents of that are, whether that's been clearly, transparently explained by the government to the people. Does it extend that far? I think those are real things that need to be engaged with, so that a solidarity movement can be strengthened. For instance, when I asked that question last Saturday to one of the speakers, her response was outright just deny that even took place, without any further expansion. And a revolutionary diplomacy, of course, at a time when there's been an act of war committed in a time of war, a reasonable thing would be to basically announce to the world that, Venezuela is basically in a state of war that's been imposed by the world's hegemon, that Venezuela does not want to be in that, and calls for an immediate unconditional truce or a peace treaty imposing clear demands on, the other side in such a truce negotiation. Anyway, just some thoughts. I think those are important debates because, we need to pose concrete demands on our own imperialist government here in Australia, of course, that and to do that, we need to strengthen the solidarity campaign. That's going to range across, left liberals right through to revolutionaries.
Thank you, Iggy. Just one last question, so then we can wrap this up and we can let the speakers relax. Tim Diamond? Is Tim Diamond still here? No. Okay, very well. Those are the two last questions. Thank you. Jorge?
¿Quieres darle tú, Carlos? O
Ajá.
sea, la última pregunta sobre todo tiene como tu perfil, hermano.
Okay. So,
Dale.
I'll look. I can't speak for the government because I think right now, of course, I used to be a diplomat until January of last year. So I'm not in government anymore. But I do imagine what runs through some people's heads at a moment like this. But I think it is the most difficult situation that we have lived on in the 200 years of our history, and I think that we have to be very careful. I mean, the government and everybody in the revolution, I think, has to play a very cautious role. I agree with the fact that things must be transparent. I mean, that is the revolutionary way, and I think everything has been transparent in the sense that we have received statements from the government from day one. I see also because we can't fall into the trap of taking our information from, the State Department spokesperson or the White House spokesperson or whatever, the mainstream media says, because obviously they're in a moment where they're going to, blow things out of proportion and say some things that are convenient to their own political audience. And again, that should never be our source of information. I think the government has been doing an important job at clarifying step by step. It has always, I mean, since the beginning of the diplomatic outreach, we said we're trying to rebuild the government says they're trying to rebuild a diplomatic relationship with the United States that includes commerce and different things, which basically, I mean, if you look at it, it really shows how the United States is actually dismantling their maximum pressure campaign on Venezuela in a way. I mean, it was before 2017 with the actual blockade on the oil sector. Venezuela traded oil with the United States. That was normal. That was an everyday thing. It was our main trading partner. It was our main trading partner for many products, food and other products. That is not new. That happened under Chavez. That's not something that was even anti-revolutionary or pre-revolutionary. That used to be the normal day-to-day thing under Chavez. What the United States did when they took the maximum pressure campaign was really because they thought it would be something that would last, 2-3 days. It would put Guaido in the presidency, and that would be over. Basically, they took Venezuelan oil out of their market. They took themselves out of the Venezuelan market for other products. I mean, they what they're doing now, and it's terrible. It happened. It happened this way. But what they're doing now is trying to, erase the mistake that of the maximum pressure campaign. And so Venezuela is going to, Venezuela now has the task of finding a way of making this work for the Venezuelan people, finding a way of how does Venezuela reinsert itself into this part of the oil market, into this part of the negotiation that comes back to again to benefit the people. And the first thing that President Delcy said, acting President Delcy, which by the way probably is not covered in most of the media, but she did establish that the funds that are coming in, because funds are coming in because it is a sale, it is trade, it's not we're giving away the oil to the United States. I mean, again, that's part of the media manipulation, but it is a sale. And it's actually being sold at market prices, which means that price is actually above the price that we were getting under the sanctions, because of the sanctions that we had to find other that would lower the price of oil. So this income that is coming in is going to be used. There's a fund that was just created for things like food and basic necessities. And then public services like water, electricity, all these things. You have to understand that for many years, Venezuela has been under the influence of the United States, and almost everything that was built here was U.S. made. So when the U.S. imposed these sanctions, then we couldn't find spare parts to repair, the water pumping machines. We couldn't find spare parts for medical equipment. We couldn't find spare parts for garbage trucks. Imagine what that does. The everyday life of people is affected. Now that's going to begin to change. And then the government, I think, did a very important thing, which was immediately say, these two funds are going to be the priority of what we're going to do with this money that's coming in. We're working on a deal with the United States. Again, we have to wait, we have to be patient, we have to see how this deal works out. I am sure, because I know the people that have that are in the government, that they've been working for the defense of Venezuelan sovereignty for all these years. These are not people who are just gonna we give up, or we hand it. No, these are people that are going to defend Venezuelan sovereignty to the end. That's why there's a call for national unity. That's why they're calling for the nationalist opposition to come in and also be on the same line, because we have to stand up and guarantee Venezuela's sovereignty. It's a difficult context, but I think the revolutionary commitment is there, to engage in this way, and I think as much as possible, at least I feel that the government has been communicating day by day the actions, the steps that are being taken, the guarantees that are being given, and I think we have to trust that source and not be, for our own mindsets here in Venezuela, not fall into the trap of the scandalous type of news, everybody saying something or talking about something that Trump said or something that Rubio said, and try to make that the whole narrative. We understand that this is a fight that is also taking place at the cognitive level, at the information level, And again, you got to think, the issue with the CIA. Well, these are the people that they're going to put out, and these are the people we have to talk. In diplomacy, you talk to everyone. I mean, when I was in the Foreign Service, I had to meet with Elliot Abrams, which is probably he's a terrorist and somebody that that led the massacre. Because of his fault, there was a huge massacre of over 1,000 people in Guatemala, and that was our task. We had to sit and listen and of course not agree and whatever happened afterwards. But that's how diplomacy works. You often sit with people that you don't like, you don't particularly like, but that's the way you have to do it.
Jorge, you want to add some points?
Yeah, no, and in the economical and political, I think Carlos responded. I just want to make sure you understand Trump needs to control the narrative because of everything we have said, mostly because the midterms election in the United States. So, for example, Maduro and Celia are going to be one of the main subjects of the campaign. And I just want you to understand that not only Maduro and Celia were kidnapped by this invasion and bombardment, the Venezuelan economy was kidnapped more than it was with the blockade. Now, basically in these years, we have been growing. I don't know if you know it, but we have been growing in the past years. Like I think it's 3 or 4 years. We have the economy has been growing because we adapted to the blockade, and what Carlos just said, that we didn't have the parts for replacement for the industry and everyday life. We adapted and we learned how to do that, and we start to grow again, and all of the things that you are listening from Trump, it's for controlling the narrative. The same licenses and the same oil contracts that are being discussed today were approved by President Maduro past year, are the same licenses that we are speaking of. It's nothing new. It's only that they want to, I don't know if you know it, but most of the refineries in southern U.S. processes Venezuelan heavy oil. Texan refineries, for example, depends on our oil. And the blockade that they applied on us were affecting themselves. So, and the other thing to understand is that they are geopolitically trying to colonize all the region, but also take out Russia and China. Before this kidnap of our oil industry, we were selling 40% of our oil to China. Now they don't have that oil. That oil is going to the United States. So it's the control of the region in a geopolitical matter, but also it's the controlling the narrative. You will see that, as Carlos said, Delcy said that, for answering Ryan too. Ryan, those $3 million in oil are nothing compared to what we were earning before the blockade. By the year 2014, our revenue was $55 billion. $55 billion. And we are speaking of $300 million. That's nothing. So it's not like we are going to be a country with the material means because Trump bombarded us. That's a lie. We have been struggling and adapting our economy and our everyday life for existing, for the right of existence. So it's something that you're going to see very common this year. Everything that Trump is going to say, it's because he wants to claim that victory for himself, but it's not a lie. It's not a truth. It's a lie. We have, as I said, we have been growing. The economy has been growing. We have, finally, at last, past year, President Maduro finally declared Venezuela 100% sustainable in the fruit production. That's something that we didn't even dreamed of when before the Bolivarian Revolution existed. So yeah, it's something that we are going to see this year. The control of the narrative, it's critical. And we have always have a suggestion here. We have to go to the original sources of the information to check if they are real, to check if it's not a fake, if it's not EI. That's all.
Thank you, George, Jorge, and Carlos. I just wanted to say for people that are interested in thinking about what's happening in Latin America and how Australia is responding, Red Spark will be continuing to engage in educational platforms to build solidarity. We know that the US, the Trump administration, is now looking towards Cuba. We will be doing a lot of activism around this through this year. I think we are starting a campaign of 100 years with Fidel, which we are connecting to the Venezuelan revolution, which is very important. And I just want to say, I know that Iggy Kim has put a comment there about an article we wrote. Please, we encourage everyone to go and read the articles. We, as a Marxist-Leninist organization that is interested in anti-imperialism, are going to hold other left-wing organizations accountable for poor positions that they're taking in this obvious, just obvious imperialist perspective that the US is taking and the policies that they're taking in Latin America. We've got here a government that is absolutely cowards when it comes to just standing up for international law. So I encourage you all to read those articles. We are going to still hold accountable all those organizations that are failing to stand up against anti-imperialism. So please join us. Put your emails in. We're going to be doing a lot of activities this year in defense of the Venezuela and in defense of Cuba. And I just want to say that was very informative. It's going to be on the YouTube channel. Jorge and Carlos, thank you so much for all that information. It's just brilliant. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you.
For solidarity. Thanks.
Solidarity, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, comrades. Good evening.
Okay.
See you later, comrades.